Excellency. I would now like to give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Netherlands on behalf of the European Union. You have the floor, Excellency.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the honor to speak on behalf of the European Union, and the following countries align themselves with this statement: former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, Montenegro, Albania, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Republic of Moldova, Georgia and Ukraine. Technical assistance and capacity building are essential to the integration of human rights and fundamental freedom in national policies and framework. The EU would like to commend the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights for its constant commitment and solid cooperation and dialogue with states, regional organizations and other stakeholders in this regard. The growing number of requests for assistance by the OHCHR shows its vital role and widely appreciated and recognized. We are aware that the OHCHR is consequently facing challenges to find and allocate the necessary resources and hope that this can properly be addressed. We encourage countries from across regions to further support the Office financially. The EU encourages all states to fully cooperate with the OHCHR and to be open to technical assistance and capacity building, but also, when needed, to allow the OHCHR full access to monitor and report on human rights situation. Mr. President, the EU deplores the deeply concerning humanitarian and human rights situation of the Yemenis. It calls on all parties to fully respect and oblige by international human rights and international humanitarian law, and to fully invest in the ongoing UN-led process in Kuwait. We welcome the offer extended by the Office of the High Commissioner to assist the National Commission of Inquiry in its work, to be conducted in accordance with international standards. We are looking forward to the High Commissioner's comprehensive report on human rights and violations in Yemen, and on the progress made by the National Commission of Inquiry. The previous report on Yemen testifies to the OHCHR's solid working method. We expect the government to continue to work with the representative of the High Commissioner and to create closer cooperation. Mr. President, on Cambodia, the EU shares the concern recently expressed by the UN Secretary General, the High Commissioner for Human Rights, as well by a number of UN Special Rapporteurs, and support their call on the Cambodian authorities to resume a peaceful and constructive dialogue with the opposition, and to ensure a safe and enabling environment for human rights defenders and civil society. We are mindful of the situation in Central African Republic and Côte d'Ivoire and have commented on them in detail in the dedicated interactive dialogues. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Vice President. France aligns itself with the European Union statement. In Libya and Iraq, the human rights situation is very worrying. The fight against impunity should be a priority for these two countries in order to contribute to national reconciliation, to put an end to violence and give victims justice. In Libya, France renews its trust in the government of national accord and supports its activities to establish peace and the rule of law. We encourage it to continue to fully cooperate with the human rights procedures and the ICC. France is concerned about the growing deterioration in the human rights situation in Yemen as hostilities between the coalition and the Houthis continue. It's vital that all parties respect human rights and international humanitarian law, and that humanitarian aid can be delivered to the civilian population, which continues to suffer severe shortages. We call upon all parties to ensure that violations do not go unpunished. France calls on all parties to successfully conclude the political process started in Kuwait. France is closely monitoring the human rights situation in the Central African Republic and Côte d'Ivoire, and I gave a detailed statement on these issues during the interactive dialogues on them. In Mali, protecting human rights and fighting impunity are vital for sustainable reconciliation. We encourage all parties to fully implement the Mali Peace and Reconciliation Agreements. It's vital that all perpetrators of human rights violations be brought to trial. And we note that the ICC has been monitoring the Mali situation since January 2012. We encourage Mali to pursue its cooperation with the court. France is also concerned about the deterioration of the human rights situation in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Preparing elections should be a priority, and France calls upon the authorities to fully respect fundamental freedoms in line with international commitments. We condemn the increased atrocities in the east of the country and call upon the security forces to strengthen their efforts to protect civilians with MONUSCO's support. We're concerned about the deterioration of the human rights situation in Cambodia, notably arrests and intimidation of civil society representatives. We're also concerned about the situation in Ukraine, which we referred to in our statement yesterday. Thank you. I'll give the floor to the distinguished representative of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. The United Kingdom remains deeply concerned by the human rights situation in Ukraine. This includes reports of arbitrary detention of civilians, torture, ill treatment and enforced disappearances in eastern Ukraine, as well as the recent banning of the Tatar Mejlis in the Crimea. We call on Russia to respect international law and allow unfettered access into Crimea and eastern Ukraine of international human rights monitoring agencies. We call on both Russia and Ukraine to investigate reports of violations and abuses, ensuring that those responsible are held to account. We are encouraged by the progress made by the unity government in Libya, but reports of continued violations and abuses, including war crimes, remain a serious concern. The United Kingdom echoes the calls to Maldives from the Commonwealth Ministerial Action Group for the release of political prisoners, strengthening the separation of powers and the independence of the judiciary, and action to restore confidence in the fundamental freedoms of association, assembly and free speech. In Somalia, we remain concerned at the targeting of journalists with impunity, the widespread use of the military courts, and public executions held in violation of international human rights law. We are concerned about harassment of the acting leader of the opposition and representatives of civil society organizations in Cambodia. Recent intercommunal fighting in Mali is a cause for concern. We call on the signatories to the Malian Peace and Reconciliation Accord to implement the provisions on justice and accountability following the conflict in northern Mali in 2012 and 2013. Fragile security across the Central African Republic, together with human rights abuses including gender-based violence, lack of accountability and the urgent need for humanitarian assistance, remain significant problems. To promote national reconciliation, the United Kingdom calls on the government of Côte d'Ivoire to assure that all parties responsible for abuses and violations of international humanitarian law during the 2010 to 2011 post-electoral crisis are brought to justice. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Muchas gracias.
Japan has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. We are concerned about the current escalation of political tension in Cambodia, which seems to have resulted in a considerable narrowing of space for legitimate and normal activities by opposition parties and civil society organizations. We are equally concerned about the status of the culture of dialogue between the two main political parties, which seem to have ceased functioning. Thus, we call on all the relevant Cambodian stakeholders to work towards de-escalating the tensions and building trust and confidence. We urge them to make their utmost effort to create a political environment which allows opposition parties and civil society to function freely and normally, thus enabling the upcoming elections to be conducted in a free and fair manner. We expect that the government of Cambodia will continue to fulfill its commitment to implement its obligation under international human rights treaty and conventions for the promotion and protection of the human rights of its people. The government of Japan in close cooperation with other countries concerned, stands ready to assist Cambodian stakeholders to this end. I thank you.
States of America has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. The United States encourages governments facing human rights challenges to allow for the establishment of OHCHR country offices to help them address those challenges. While Cambodia has had an OHCHR office for many years, we are deeply concerned by recent investigations, arrests, and detention of civil society representatives and political figures. We urge the government to end these actions, ensure that the judiciary works as an unbiased arbiter of Cambodia's laws in accordance with international human rights law, and engage in meaningful dialogue with the political opposition to reach a peaceful resolution to the current situation. We commend Tunisia, where the government has worked closely with OHCHR on many issues of great importance, including the holding of free and fair elections and in reforming their constitution. Colombia has taken bold efforts to create a just and lasting peace through its negotiation with the FARC. We strongly encourage the government to extend OHCHR's mandate without changes into the next administration in order to better serve the victims of the conflict and the Cambodian and the Colombian people. We congratulate Honduras for opening the OHCHR office in 2015. We hope a chief is chosen as soon as possible. We urge the office to work closely with human rights defenders, many of whom live under threat as seen by the March 2016 murder of Berta Cáceres, along with important work on training security and justice sector officials. We look forward to working with the government of Burma to address the human rights issues outlined in the High Commissioner's report and to have discussions regarding the opening of the OHCHR office, which would honor the previous government's commitments. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.